Hey everyone, welcome back to the Geo interview. Today, it is with great pleasure and honor that we're delighted to host Dr. Andrea Wechsler. She's a member of the European Parliament for the Christian Democratic Union. She's an economic law expert focusing on digital transformation, innovation, and research in light of climate change challenges. As a professor of economic private law, Dr. Wechsler advocates for integrating Christian democratic values into the European policy. Further, she brings a wealth of experience in driving EU policies aimed at advancing digital innovation, strengthening economic resilience, and addressing sustainability goals. Dr. Wechsler, we are delighted to have you here. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss the partnership between the European Union and India. And I'm very much looking forward to this dialogue. I'm doing fine, and I hope you're doing fine too.
I'm doing wonderful to have this chance to have this conversation with you. Now, going ahead, before we, let's just say, sort of discuss sector specific things, I would want to ask you something about the India overall relationship. With 2024 marking 20 years of our strategic partnership, what do you identify as the most significant successes of this relationship? And what would you say on that?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that we discuss the crucial and involving partnership between the European Union and India today, as this partnership is very, very valuable. And rather than looking back, I'd like to look forward because you and we are all navigating in a more increasingly interconnected, complex world. And so it's essential that we now explore ways how we can deepen our collaboration on global priorities in areas such as sustainable development, digital transformation, trade, climate change. I think these are the main areas where we have to focus our opportunities to align our efforts, to foster innovation, and to empowering, especially our young people, to shape our joint future together.
So one of the things that you've highlighted is the range of issues or areas that you've mentioned, right? Where India and EU are collaborating, and as a policymaker, you see the scope of us collaborating further. With that, I would want to shift your focus to something that the European Union has been increasingly focusing upon, which is diversifying its supply chains in the context of the ongoing geopolitical changes in the world. If that's the case, I would want to know your opinion on how do you see India's role as a reliable partner in this context, in especially sectors like renewable energy and technology?
Well, thank you very much for this question and also for pointing out these sectors like renewable energy and technology, as these are going to be key sectors in the upcoming years. Now, looking into the India European partnership, definitely India has the potential to be a key partner for the European Union in its efforts to diversify supply chains, particularly in these critical sectors like renewable energies and technology. India's growing manufacturing capabilities, the competitive workforce, also the increasing focus on sustainability make it for us a natural ally for the EU in building a resilient and reliable supply chain.
I hope as we're going ahead, the two blocks, or rather, I should say, India and European Union, are able to cooperate more on diversifying supply chains. With that, I would, as a EU policymaker, we would want to tap into your insights when it comes to regulating uh, the emerging technologies, something that European Union is renowned in the world for. For example, we're living in the era of artificial intelligence with the rise of ChatGPT or Gemini. With that, I would want to ask you about there's a growing interest even in India in terms of building a comprehensive AI global framework. What insights is it that EU can share with India in terms of regulating these platforms like artificial intelligence?
Well, as you have said, the EU and India have a significant opportunity to learn from each other as they develop frameworks where we try to balance AI innovation on the one hand with, on the other hand, ethical AI deployment. And if you're asking me what you can learn, maybe there is a couple of key lessons where we can foster our exchange. Now, from the EU, maybe the issue of prioritizing accountability and transparency is important. The EU's Artificial Intelligence Act emphasizes sort of risk-based categorizations and stringent accountability measures for high-risk applications. And India could adopt similar mechanisms to ensure that AI systems in critical sectors such as healthcare or finance are transparent and include robust safeguards. The EU's focus on protecting fundamental rights and addressing bias in AI systems offers maybe a very strong foundation for ethical deployment. But turning it around and looking into what could we learn from India, then maybe it's scaling AI for inclusivity. So if you look at India's success in deploying AI for large-scale public initiatives, such as digital payments and healthcare, that could be a valuable insight into how AI can be leveraged for inclusivity and accessibility, and the EU could benefit from India's emphasis on cost-effective, scalable AI solutions, and particularly in addressing the needs of the undeserved populations. There are certainly also joint lessons. And the lessons that we could maybe jointly take is that harmonizing regulation with innovation might be important. Both the EU and India must avoid over-regulation that stifles innovation, while at the same time ensuring ethical guardrails. So they could collaborate to identify best practices in fostering a vibrant AI startup ecosystem, creating sandboxes for testing innovative solutions, and also enabling cross-border R&D partnerships. Now, there's many more issues like the question of data sovereignty and privacy, but what I do think as a final point that's also important, I think by working together, the EU and China, in India, pardon for that, so the EU and India can advocate for global AI standards that reflect the shared values of transparency, fairness, and safety. And this collaboration between EU and India could shape multilateral discussions on AI governance, ensuring a balance between ethical consideration and technological advancement on a global scale. I think these are the lessons that we could learn from collaboration.
I think we've spoken so much on, talking about how should we work upon AI that if it was to me, I would have talked to you for hours just about regulating the artificial intelligence. But then I think we'd go on to another questions. But before that, one of the things that you've really highlighted is just how much India and EU can learn from each other's expertise, which is also complementary. But the other thing is, there's a lot of talks about regulation and the way you've put it in a box, which is like, on one hand, we've got to ensure the ethical frameworks, and on the other hand, we still have to stay away from overregulation. I think that perfectly sums up that conversation. With that, we'd like to come to your work. So, having gone across your work, innovation is a key focus, or it has been a key focus of your policy agenda, particularly in co-developing critical technologies, be it the green hydrogen or the semiconductors. Now, with India also wanting to advance its semiconductor mission and EU implementing its CHIPS Acts, how, as a policymaker, do you think what is the arena wherein the two countries can work on joint R&D initiatives and public-private partnerships?
Well, that's a very important idea, and to break it down to where we can actually join these initiatives is very crucial. I do think there is a great opportunity to strengthen supply chain resilience, foster technological sovereignty without succumbing to protectionism. And that's the key that we see in today's world, where we see a lot of protectionist tendencies, that it's really worthwhile to look into how can we achieve again, joint initiatives and partnerships between the EU and India. One idea would be collaborative R&D platforms. So we could establish dedicated EU-India R&D platforms for critical technologies. You mentioned semiconductors or green hydrogen to facilitate joint innovations. Those platforms could share, could focus on shared challenges, reduce dependencies on rare earth materials, improve energy efficiency in chip manufacturing, and it could leverage especially the expertise of researchers and universities and industries from both regions. A second idea could be public and private partnerships and encouraging those to drive investment and accelerate innovation. For example, EU companies could partner with India startups and enterprises so that we jointly develop cutting edge semiconductor manufacturing processes or green hydrogen technologies and blend EU precision engineering with India's cost effective scalability. A third idea might be knowledge and talent exchange. So, if we promote cross border exchange programs for researchers, engineers, technicians, that could enhance the skills pipeline for critical industries. Joint training initiatives in the semiconductor design and hydrogen technology would ensure that both regions have the talent pool necessary to sustain the growth. Now, another issue could be, but it's very, very ambitious, align policy frameworks. If we harmonize policies under initiatives like the India's Semiconductor Mission and the EU Chips Act, that could ensure regulatory coherence. And if we align standards and certifications, that would enable smoother collaboration and market access while avoiding duplicative barriers. And again, I think both the EU and India, they are well on their way to focus on open markets, to focus on put an emphasis on fair competition. And I think especially in these times, it's really important to commit to avoiding protectionist tendencies by promoting open trade policies and fair competition. And we should prioritize our partnership and to strengthen jointly the technological capabilities without undermining the global innovation ecosystem. I think there's many opportunities. I've mentioned part of them, but the crucial and baseline is the focus on open markets and fair competition between EU and India.
There was something so poetic about the way you've chosen to answer this question that and as again a policymaker there were so many insights that you've come up with, and as a think tank we produce a lot of reports, a lot of articles wherein we talk about how can we increase the collaboration. And I think whatever you've spoken, we're going to take notes of it and sort of incorporate that into our literature going ahead. With that, having focused upon some of the sector specific things in terms of our collaboration and what are the venues for joint cooperation, now I want to draw your focus upon something which is on EU's thinking. Given the context of the world, I would want to ask you about how does EU look at promoting meaningful reforms in global governance structures? Now, this is something that India as a nation has also been deeply focusing upon, especially in a global cooperation, even in under India's G20 presidency, reforms of the global structures is something that even we focused upon. Where do you think India and EU can collaborate upon such reforms, especially in organizations like the UN and the WTO?
Well, thank you very much for mentioning, especially also India's presidency of the G20, because I do think it presents a pivotal opportunity to reinforce global cooperation and, especially at times of bilateralism, to reinforce multilateralism. And I do see the EU and India as key players to collaborate to drive meaningful reforms in global governance structures. So, one of the areas where the EU and India could work together is the question of advocating for UN Security Council reform. So, what we do jointly in that area is that we push for reforms in the United Nations Security Council to make it more inclusive and reflect current geopolitical realities. I know India's aspirations for a permanent seat that's supported by the EU that could enhance representation for emerging economies and foster equitable decision making. That's one of the areas. Another area is strengthening the WTO framework. Now, the EU and India could work together to modernize the WTO by addressing the challenges like dispute resolution, special and differential treatment for developing countries, and especially the digital economy. If we could co-develop proposals that balance the interests of developed and developing nations, that could ensure that the WTO remains a robust forum for fair, open, and inclusive trade. Now, if you look at a third forum, the G20, then leveraging India's G20 presidency, the EU and India could champion initiatives that amplify the voices of emerging economies, smaller nations. Also, the European Union has small nations like Malta as part of their membership, so we're well versed with dealing with smaller countries. And that could include a platform for underrepresented countries to participate in critical discussions on trade, climate, and technology. A further forum that I particularly appreciate, and where I just returned from the COP29 climate conference in Baku, that could be really fostering climate finance, resilience, mitigation, adaptation, developing carbon markets in the context like COP, because I do think in the light of the climate crisis, EU and India could advocate for stronger commitments to climate funds, to broadening the donor base, to ensure global governance structure that prioritize resource mobilization for vulnerable countries. That's in the area of a joint and combined leadership in forums like COP or even G20. Now, there is many areas that I could even further to the ones that I tapped into talk about, but I do think what is important as the underlying baseline is that we build trust through diplomacy, because sustained EU-India dialogue and joint initiatives in those multi-forums can build trust and demonstrate that there is a shared commitment by the EU and India to an equitable global governance. This includes also organizing high-level summits together, working groups to align strategies. I do think we do have a very important role, and we could, as a partnership, play a pivotal role in shaping global governance structures.
Dr. Wechsler, while you've spoken about a range of areas wherein the two countries could collaborate upon when it comes to reforming the global structures, personally, one of the two things that I've very resonated with and I've liked is that just how much emphasis you've put on building diplomacy, and how through diplomacy, if we can build trust between the two blocks and between the world and the several blocks in the region, the two countries can go ahead and actually reform the much needed reforms when it comes to the global organizations. With that, I would want to come to EU health policies. Now, EU as a body has been making significant progress in integrating health technologies into public healthcare systems. And as a nation, India heavily focuses upon health, which it considers is one of its national priority. Where do you think, again, the two countries can learn from each other's policies on health, and where do you think the two countries can collaborate when it comes to health?
Ooh, that's a very, very, very important question, and also a very different questions, because on the one hand, the EU's experience in integrating health technologies into the public healthcare systems could offer very valuable advice for India, in particular when it goes to achieving universal healthcare and improving healthcare outcomes also in all areas, including the rural areas. So maybe some of the points I would like to make in relation to your question is, first of all, very important is, and that's a lesson we can learn from the European Union, that we have a very robust digital health infrastructure. So what we've done is invest in interoperable digital health systems all over Europe, such as the electronic health record, and that ensures seamless data sharing across healthcare providers. And that could be a way to apply it as well for India in order to establish a unified digital health platform that connects healthcare facilities nationwide, rural clinics, allowing for efficient patient data management and continuity of care. A second area where we have lessons in the European Union is the telemedicine services. I do admit, being German, there is countries that are way more advanced in telemedicine services than Germany. Take, for instance, the Netherlands. But we do have in some countries a very leveraged telemedicine service to address healthcare access challenges. For us, it's more like a service character, but especially in remote areas in India, that could enable patients to consult specialists without traveling long distances. And so that could be a second area where healthcare services from European Union experiences could spill over to China. What we also to India. What we also have is the enhancement of public-private partnerships. So in the European Union, we have successfully engaged private sector partners in deploying health technologies, which has improved efficiency and access. And that could be an ideal for application for India as well to foster PPPs to provide affordable services, mobile diagnostic units, and low-cost digital devices in areas where possibly people are underserved. There is many more areas you could think about: health literacy, digital inclusion, utilizing AI and predictive analysis, scaling mobile health. What is important is the adopting of a policy and regulatory framework that builds trust in these digital health systems as well. That we've done in the European Union by ensuring data privacy and security. After all, it's very sensitive data that's involved in the area of healthcare. So having the regulatory framework on data privacy and security in place has allowed us to put in particular emphasis on the implementation of digital health systems. And I do think in the application for India, that could be one of the recommendations to develop and enforce clear guidelines for digital health platforms, data protection in order to ensure patient confidentiality. I think that could be some of the lessons that India could take from harmonizing the European Union healthcare market.
Well, the way you've spoken about the health policy suggestions really sort of shows just how much you feel about health and how much you've been working on these ones. Now, with that, although and this is going to be one of the last questions for this conversation, is although you've spoken about how India as a country and EU as a bloc can collaborate upon digital innovation, but still, I want to ask you about your views on how do you see the EU-India Trade and Technology Council, and how using the council we can sort of go ahead and further collaborate upon innovation or digital transformation.
Well, yeah, the EU-India Trade and Technology Council is a very important council to deepen cooperation on digital transformations. And you know about the challenges, particularly concerning AI and emerging technologies. So when you look at the challenges such as divergent approaches to regulation, that could be one of the areas where we can deepen our collaboration, or where the Trade and Technology Council could focus on. So if you look at the approach the European Union has adopted to AI and AI regulation, it's a very precautionary, very rights-focused approach, emphasizing ethical standards, privacy, risk mitigation. Now, India, while committed to regulation, is much more pragmatic and innovation-driven and prioritizes scalability and economic growth. And so I do think the Council could foster the dialogue to identify where are there shared principles, such as fairness, transparency, and accountability, while, of course, allowing flexibility for regional priorities. And I would love to see more of the Indian approach as well in the European Union, more innovation driven, excited for AI. So I do think there's a lot to learn from the Indian approach as well. So the divergent approaches to regulation, that could be one of the areas for the Trade and Technology Council. Another area could be, we do have the challenge that the European Union's GDPR, the data protection mechanism, places very strict conditions on data transfers, while India's Data Protection Act emphasizes data localization for certain categories. So these differing stances may hinder collaboration on AI and other data-intensive technologies. So we could negotiate data sharing agreements that balance sovereignty with operational needs, and potentially modeled on adequacy decisions or mutual recognition of data protection frameworks. That could be a second area. A third area, and I think that's very crucial, is the question of ethical AI and bias mitigation. We focus in the European Union very stringently on ethical AI. We include bias mitigation, algorithm transparency into our regulation, and that might be somewhat of a clash with India's focus on rapid adoption and scalability of AI technology. So the solution could be that we develop joint standards for ethical AI that incorporate inclusivity and fairness while accommodating the need for flexibility in low resource settings. And collaborative research on AI and bias, and particularly in a multicultural context, could bridge those gaps. One of the final issues, which I think is very important, is the questions of standardization and interoperability. We do have differences in technical standards for AI, 5G, IoT, and other technologies, and that could create interoperability issues, limiting cross-border flow of innovations. So the Council should collaborate on the development of global standards through multilateral forums, ensuring that technologies are interoperable and adaptable across regions. So there's many areas where I do think the Council could play a very crucial role, where a structured dialogue, joint research, multilateral collaboration could be very fruitful, and where the EU and India could align their regulatory frameworks to faster innovation, ensure ethical practices, but also just drive a transformative digital partnership and maybe share a little bit of excitement about AI.
In this question, and one of the running themes that you've spoken in this conversation is how the two countries can align their policy frameworks. And you explain that through the digital sharing agreements, because we, as a country and as a bloc, might differ on certain regulatory mechanisms. But if we can find a way to sort of renegotiate that and then align our policy frameworks, well, then that sort of sets us up well for the collaborating mode. Now, with that, although we've tapped into numerous insights of your professional expertise, one of our last questions, or rather, I should say, the last question to you is going to be something personal, right? As young people, we look up to people like you and your work, and whatever that you've been doing across all these years. So what sort of lesson, or I don't know, any insight you would have for the young people that would be watching this conversation? What advice would you sort of want to give it to us, both from the youth of India and then EU as well?
Well, especially when it comes to young people, I've worked many years in a university, and I've really appreciated the exchange of young people. And I would like to encourage the young people, both in the European Union and India, in terms of two directions. The first is, it's your future out there, and the future is really exciting with artificial intelligence coming. There's many challenges, and you mentioned the healthcare sectors, but there's many excitements in emerging technologies. I would really like to encourage young people to stay curious and to take their responsibility for bringing this change, this transformation along. These young people, they are all part and an essential driver for innovation, for transformation, for the solutions to climate changes. So the young generation is key for solving the global problems and challenges. And I would like to encourage to take their responsibility in their role, because I know we can trust them that they will. But the other encouragement that I would like to give to the young people is, go out and meet. We've had in the European Union a wonderful program, and still have it. It's called Erasmus, which is meant to bring young people together and to make experiences in different cultures and different environments and different histories. And I do think if we could extend this towards the India-EU relationship and encourage young people to get in a personal exchange, there is a lot of digital exchange, but I do think you have to meet in person at some point, and to really deep dive into the other person's culture, into the other environments. Be curious, go out and meet. And I think this is one of the baselines for global peace, to get an understanding for the other culture, for the other history, for the other country, for the other European Union. So please feel invited to come over to the European Union to meet your young fellows here over in Europe. And I think this will be a great contribution to a better dialogue between EU and India. So please feel welcome.
You talked about the initiative, which is Erasmus, and as a young organization coming from India, which is the Geostrata, we'd love to be a part of it. And again, as you sort of emphasized upon, increasing the cultural exchange between the youth of the two countries or blocks. With that, Dr. Andrea, it's been wonderful talking to you, and I hope that we keep coming across on numerous times. We keep having these conversations with you, and then we are able to help the case of EU-India strategic partnership. With that, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for this amazing conversation, and we would see you again. Thank you so much, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you very much.
All right, it's been a pleasure.